4 o'clock via technology, then that's, it's a comment actually in the book talking about engagement being in and outside of a setting where you're discussing something. So at the tables, it's kind of whatever you're comfortable with, but on the iPads, I have a link to, it's a Today's Meet, which is just kind of a place to, if you have a question or a comment or anything that can kind of drive our discussion, that's kind of, this is just a website to use. So they're already hooked up on the iPad, so if there's ever a time that, or on your phone or your own personal device. So just to better engage with that. Or I also just brought the good old whiteboard so that if there's something that you want to write down or any page number reference if you've had the book and taken a look at it. So just to kind of go through that. My name is Kelly Johnson, and I work here in the College of Education and Teacher Education as an instructional coach. And I used to be a math teacher, and so if you're thinking back to your math days, like engagement was kind of a big deal for me teaching because yeah, that's sometimes a really hard thing to get freshmen, sophomore, junior, senior students engaged in really exciting things like quadratic equations. So I've always been highly interested in engagement, and I feel really honored to kind of be facilitating the book discussion. But I also thank you for kind of spending your time here today talking about engagement. I think obviously if you're here, you find it important, and just as I do. So the first thing to look at is just kind of who are we in the settings that you teach in. I think that's important because I don't know who you are and if you're teaching in a lab setting or if you're teaching in a small group. So I actually was going to use this to model a few things. So today not only are we going to probably talk about it, but then model a few of the suggestions and sets from the back of the book, the student engagement techniques. So they really said building relationships and getting to know your students is a big deal. So you're not my students, but might as well model it. We are today. While we're talking about it, yeah. So hi, come on in. So this is called That's Me, and it's kind of a quick way to get to know people, and I think it's going to work in a small group, but I can see how it would definitely work in a lecture of 100 people too. So I guess first off, a little bit about who you are is what college you're in. So when I say the college name, if that's the college name you're in, then you can just raise your hand and say, that's me. So arts and sciences? That's me. That's 2, great. How about business administration? Communication, finance, and media? Education?
That's me.
Information science and technology? Public affairs and community service? There we go. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I got all the colleges on the university, so thought that worked out. But okay, so how many are new faculty to UNO this year? How about new university faculty period? Nobody. Okay. How about more than 5 years as university faculty? Excellent. More than 10 years.
Now I gotta do the math. That's almost new.
Okay, great. That gives me a little insight too. But how about teaching a small group setting? So let's say under 30 students. Majority. Okay. How about in a lecture setting? Let's just say greater than 30 students as well. And then you didn't raise your hand, Joe.
Oh, he's a traitor. He's here to survive.
Well, I am here not to spy, but I was very interested in I'm interested in the issue of student engagement with faculty and how they respond to engagement. So.
Gotcha. And then last one, feeling that it's important to get students actively engaged at the university level. Hey, yeah, we're all here. Good. Okay, so just kind of one to model one of the kind of big key points in the book, but then also I think it's important that we see the diversity of our own group here. So, all right, so just, I guess, what did you think? And I'm just going to kind of sit, and if you haven't had a chance to take a look through the book, this would be a great opportunity as people bring up things, but I know my book is littered with sticky notes. So what did you think about the research that's involved in the first kind of few chapters, the organization of the book, just the sets themselves, and sets again is the student engagement techniques, so that's a lot of the bulk of this book. What do you think?
I gained a lot from it, a lot of new ideas, but it also affirms some of the things that I was already doing.
Can you give any examples of something that it affirmed for you?
I think the things that I'm doing in my school law class, in terms of relating real world experiences and having them talk about different things that they've seen in the public schools and how they're dealt with and that sort of thing.
That connection.
That connection and that authentic pedagogy.
Other comments?
I teach teachers how to teach, and so a big piece of that is teaching them how to engage students. And for me, this was good because it kind of made me look in the mirror in terms of, I'm good at talking about student engagement, but then kind of the reality check, you always have to model, and you're doing a nice job of that today, what you want them to be able to do in the classroom. So just kind of the idea that not only you have to talk about it, you really and truly have to do it with them, so that they'll be able to do it with their students. And it does reinforce some things you already do.
Really does.
Right now, we're working on a project, and so they're gonna make the rubric to score the project. And even if I've got a really decent rubric, I like to redo the rubric just because it makes them know what they're supposed to be doing and kind of figure out the important pieces of that. Of course, I'm guiding the whole thing, so.
Well, in terms of engagement, like making them kind of actively involved, immediately engaged, I mean, what research said was that if they're more actively involved, then that adds an engagement and a purpose in the class too, so. Other comments about the research? We will go, I pulled some of my takeaways as some quotes, but also we will kind of look if you had any major ideas that you wanted to discuss, but, any?
One of the things that occurred to me when I read it was kind of a different way of sending out the midterm, which is coming up. And I've always done a lot that's sort of an application. At that application level, like they give a scenario and then they respond with how they should react in those situations. But one of the things that I thought about after reading it was rather than having them write about it, in a midterm, maybe there's another way that they want to present it. And kind of opening up the opportunity to use their strength as a student to sort of maximize what they learned.
How about those of you not full of that, or in the teaching that you see, and were there any points that kind of came to light that you've seen on student motivation or engagement in your courses, no matter the setting?
I find interesting if we engage students in the class discussion to make it participatory and allow them to express their opinions or views on the content of the program, on the classroom session, on the cards, different cards. So it's like a visualized technique. And then we can club the opinions or ideas in different categories and then discuss in the classroom along with the inputs from the students themselves. So it really helps good because the students can stay with their ideas for a long time if we allow them to visualize on the cards by marker pens, and we club your different ideas into different groups. So even sometimes after the classroom is over, students can take the pictures of that whole board and then they can take for their homework as well.
That kind of speaks to the strategy of like the concept maps and finding the areas, and they spoke of that kind of in one of the sets, but yeah, that sounds wonderful, and then just being able to kind of create that learning a little bit for themselves.
Piggybacking on what he said, another thing that I picked up on was those concentric circles that McTighe talks about, where the really, really important content is in the middle, and then it gets, you know, the next one is the sort of important, and then the last circle is kind of the periphery. And as I think about the heavy content in this subject area, I think that I need to really make sure that these are the absolute things that you have to know when you leave this class. And so I think that's one of the things that I'm gonna do is like search and seizure. What is it that you need to know specifically about a student search?
Everybody's like diving in, and it was interesting because someone posed the question to me even today, what is engagement anyway? Like, how do we define it? And what I found interesting, and I'm going to let you all kind of take a moment to reflect on that, but what I found interesting is the book is very clear in saying, like, yeah, we need more work on that. We don't really know how to define it, and they specifically say that, but then they give some researchers, you know, thoughts on a definition. But on the kind of goldenrod handout I gave you, I kind of posed the question, what is engagement? What does it look like from your perspective, from the front of a classroom often, or maybe around? And what do you think that might look, feel, or sound like from a student? Like if they're truly engaged, how might that feel to them, or what might that look like to them? So I just, maybe a minute or so to kind of individually reflect on that, and then we'll kind of talk about what you think there. I did take a quote from the book on how they defined engagement, which, I don't know, we can come back to in a second after we talk about what you define engagement as, but what do you think? What does it look like from your perspective for students?
Well, I'd make a comment. I did some work with businesses and with Dale Carnegie, and Dale Carnegie, the whole last training of their facilitators has been on engagement in the business world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not really a solid definition of engagement in the business world. Gallup has done quite a bit of research on engagement in the business world. So one of the first things that came to my mind is even talking to the students about engagement, because if they are looking at going into as they go into the world, if that's what businesses are starting to talk about over the last 5 years or so, but right now it seems like it's the big buzzword, then we're helping them, you know, not just keep it hidden from our side of engagement, but to actually be using the term with them.
Right, verbalize, make it become real for,
Mhm.
and can they define it? Do they know
Yes.
what that's actually going to look like and feel like for themselves to be an engaged
Yes.
business male or?
When you're talking about Gallup
Mhm.
and their engagement piece, are you talking about matching a job to your individual strength, or are you talking about something beyond that?
It is looking at, for leaders particularly, how do you keep loyal employees? How do you engage the employees and keep them, and, because right now the world is so rapid and so fast
Yeah.
that people just are in and out. And you don't have the loyalty like my parents would have had where they were with
Oh,
the business
absolutely.
for 30 years or so. So it's more from the leadership role to how do you keep them. In fact, I wrote down loyalty from the student's standpoint to the school, to us.
Because especially, if you're teaching in maybe their area that they're looking to work in one day or get their
Yes.
degree in, there's kind of an inner engagement already because it's like there's maybe, they put a value on that, I really might need this. But what if you're teaching at the college level in a gen ed class? How do you engage them in what they're learning if maybe they don't see the relationship? So maybe it's making the relationship, but what are some other ideas about engagement from either your perspective or from the
I
student?
liked the Venn diagram, because I thought the intersection of active learning and motivation is engagement. And I think when you talk about the passion somebody feels for a career that they're very interested in, I think you're right, it's more naturally engaging. I do think there was a lot written on the idea that you push them higher in whatever it is you're engaging them with, and then support them as you push them. I just feel like that's kind of the crux of it. You have to ignite that passion and expose them to things where they know they're valid, they know they're gonna have real world applications and relevance to themselves and their future. Just, and it's hard to describe, which is funny because we talk about it all the time. But then to put words to student engagement, it's like, you know it when you see it.
Yes, what I was thinking, you see.
This book does talk really about active learning and motivation being kind of the foundational pieces, but then it's like, okay, so how do we cultivate that?
Mhm.
How do we motivate students? How do we make them active individually and not maybe just in a discussion that's broad? Other ideas? Yeah.
Well, I liked how in the book they talk about students having a say on the design of the class. On, like you mentioned
Mhm.
rubrics, right?
Mhm.
And so, I thought that was very interesting. So the students could have a say on how the course is going to be organized, and so I read lots of things in here that I'm not sure how to implement. I like them, but I'm not sure how to implement them because, we're still required to have a syllabus that's ready to go at the beginning of the semester, but it would be really wonderful if students could say, yes, it would be really interesting to talk about this topic for more than one day,
Right.
right? Things like that.
And that's kind of where I was going to go is, how do you take this from, okay, I really like this idea,
Yeah.
but what's actually something I could implement? Do you have any specific ideas in there that you thought this would be great, but would be difficult to implement, you think?
Well, one thing that I did, when I was reading the book at the beginning of the semester, I did try a few things that they suggest. Some of them worked really well, some not so well. But for example, I gave them I'm teaching an advanced conversation class in Spanish, so the students, their grade, most of their grade comes from them being ready in class to talk about the topic of the day. And so the rubric is a 3-page rubric where I try to be very detailed about so many different aspects of the preparation and participation. So I thought, okay, I had already done the rubric, and I thought, but I'll bring it to class on the first week and I'll ask them for feedback. Things that they don't like, things that they misunderstand, things that I need to change, and I was very open about it. I said, here's a draft of my rubric. Tell me what you think about it, what you don't like, what you don't think is fair. They all looked at it, we took about 20 minutes, I didn't get one comment. They just thought that it was perfect as it was. So, okay, and so I tried that, then I tried some of the activities. Like I got a Facebook page, a Facebook group for one class, and I'm the only one posting things. So I tried to create this sense of community that they talk about, right? They have lots of activities that they want people to do, and I thought this is really interesting, that they can create this community, right? But sometimes I felt like if they are not graded for it, then they don't have the inclination to take the time outside of, their busy day or, what's required to do the extra. Right? And then in class, the other challenge that I found is some of the activities I teach Spanish, so I have my students speak in the target language, and sometimes they just don't have the vocabulary to do certain things. Like I did the speed dating
Yes.
in the advanced class, and that worked fantastic. But with my, beginners, it didn't work so well.
Mhm.
So, but the idea was really neat, right? So I tried a few things, and some worked better than others, and yeah.
And bravo to you for trying, I mean, so
Thank you.
many things from the book, that's great, and,
Yeah.
and I would say that, I know from the College of Education standpoint, we try things and fail all the time,
Yeah.
or feel like we do, but sometimes what works best now with this group, or, maybe the Facebook page will flourish in another
That's true.
semester, so,
That's true. Yeah.
I commend you for that, that's fantastic.
I thought I would try.
Yeah.
It sounded like a good idea, and so, but it's true. Sometimes it depends on the students, and another semester might work better.
Right, right. So I was even thinking about giving this definition to you. How much would you engage in that? Actually think about how it impacted you if I were to just give you this definition of what the book said engagement was versus the conversation that we just kind of had.
It's a lot more meaningful with the conversation.
Right.
And putting our own perspective into it.
Personalizing it a bit, hopefully.
I
Again,
like how we defined it better.
and usually, from my experience at least, I think the feedback from my students on their viewpoints of things are far more interesting than what I could give them out of a book, and their connection to it. So, sometimes that's just a tweak in the way the material's presented too. But, okay, so I obviously have my computer on, it sleeps way too fast.
Instantly.
Yeah, it goes
Yeah.
to sleep too fast. So, okay, so I wanted to talk about engagement. Hopefully everyone be engaged, and also model 2 techniques at once from the book. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Inception, but it's like, okay, learning about engagement while also being engaged. Inception. So this is a gallery walk, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quotes from the book. One of them's not, I cheated. But these are just things that I made a highlight of, like, ooh, big star. So I just kind of want you to walk around for a second and see if there's one that you immediately are kind of attracted to or resonates with you about the book or about your feelings about engagement. Also, I left this up here so that if you highlighted something or marked something and had that moment of, ooh, that was a good one, please write your own and add that to it. And then just kind of mingle at the one that you feel is the one that kind of sends the best message to you personally. So we'll just take 2 minutes. When you meet with other people that have a similar interest, you can discuss why you picked that one.